Did children go to school? There were no schools in Plymouth that first year. Everyone was too busy to bother about school. But you would learn to read. You would learn your ABCs with a kind of book called a horn book. The horn book was not a real book with pages. It was a piece of wood with a piece of paper on top of it. The ABCs were printed on the paper. Then a thin sheet of animal horn was put on top of the paper to protect it. You could see right through the horn. Not everyone in Plymouth knew how to read or write. Those who knew taught the others. Boys and girls learned to read the Bible. There were no storybooks for children in Plymouth. If you liked to read, you had to read the same books as the grown-ups. What rules did people have to obey? Everyone had to obey the rules made by the leaders of Plymouth. The most important rule was going to church on Sunday. Everyone had to go. Everyone had to work hard. It was a crime to get drunk, and stealing was a crime. Did people break the rules? The first year, only 3 people were arrested for breaking the rules. The people of Plymouth had to take turns watching the town for dangers. One night, it was John Billington's turn to stay up all night. He was supposed to look out for fires or strange Indians, but he said he would not do it. John Billington was arrested. The governor told Billington what his punishment would be. His neck and his heels would be tied together. When Billington heard this, he said he would take his turn watching Plymouth like everyone else. The governor let Billington go free, but John Billington kept on getting into trouble. 9 years later, he shot a man and was hanged for his crime. The 2 servants of Stephen Hopkins got into a fight. They fought with sword and dagger. The Pilgrim leaders were angry. There were not enough men left in Plymouth, they said. No one had the right to risk his life in a fight. The 2 men would have to be punished. Each man would have his head tied to his feet. They would stay tied for a whole day, and they could have nothing to eat. After an hour of punishment, the men cried to be let free. Mr. Hopkins took pity on these 2 servants. He asked the governor to let them go, and the governor did. What happened to the Mayflower? On April the 5th, 1621, almost 4 months after landing at Plymouth, Captain Jones and his crew sailed the Mayflower back to England. Captain Jones said he would take any of the pilgrims who wanted to go back with him, but not one pilgrim went back. The pilgrims had been through terrible times. They would stay together now, no matter what might happen. The first Thanksgiving. Were there special days for fun? Weddings were fun for the whole town. The first wedding in Plymouth took place in May, 5 months after the Pilgrims landed. The Pilgrims' first Thanksgiving in the New World was a special time of joy. What did the Pilgrims have to be thankful for? They had all things in good plenty, wrote William Bradford. The corn had grown well. There was plenty to eat. If they were careful, no one would go hungry the next winter. 7 houses were finished. More were being built. The danger of sickness was over. The Pilgrims did not have to be afraid of Indians. The Indians were their friends. But most important, they had done what they had set out to do. They had found a place to live where they could worship God in their own way. And so the Pilgrims decided to set aside a special time to give thanks. What day was the first Thanksgiving in the New World? Thanksgiving was not one day. The first Thanksgiving holiday lasted for 3 days. It took place around the middle of October in the year 1621. Who took part in the holidays? Everyone in Plymouth, about 50 pilgrims and their Indian friends. The pilgrims were thankful for their Indian friends. Without the Indian corn, the pilgrims would have starved. Without Squanto to teach them Indian ways, the pilgrims could not have lasted the year. The governor of Plymouth asked Chief Massasoit to come. The governor told the Indian chief to bring along a few friends. Chief Massasoit brought more than a few friends. He showed up with 90 Indian braves. What did they eat for Thanksgiving? When you think of Thanksgiving, do you think of turkey and cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie? The Pilgrims had turkey too, but their turkeys were not like the ones we eat today. Their turkeys were wild and much bigger. Plenty of cranberries grew around Plymouth, but the Pilgrims did not make cranberry sauce. They had plenty of pumpkins, but no pumpkin pie. They did have meat pies. There were wild geese, wild ducks, lobsters, eels, clams, oysters, and many other kinds of fresh fish. And the Indians killed 5 deer for the feast. There was corn cooked in many different ways, and there was popcorn too. The Pilgrims had no sugar. Perhaps they used wild honey to sweeten their food. There were vegetables from the Pilgrims' garden: carrots and cucumbers, turnips and onions, radishes, beets, and cabbages. Most of the cooking and all of the feasting was done outside. Deer, turkeys, geese, and ducks were roasted on outdoor spits. Lobster and oysters were roasted over hot coals. For dessert, there were wild berries and fruits. Strawberries, gooseberries, plums, cherries, and other fruits had been picked in the spring and dried to eat later. No one went hungry for the first Thanksgiving. There was so much food that it took 3 days to eat it all. How did the Pilgrims spend Thanksgiving? The Pilgrim women and girls spent most of their time cooking. The men and the boys played games. The Indians and Pilgrims shot bows and arrows. They played throwing the bar and hand wrestling. They had contests, jumping and running and racing. They played games of stool ball with a leather ball filled with feathers. Miles Standish held a parade. One man blew the trumpet. One man beat on the drum. The little group of soldiers marched and fired their guns. Thanksgiving was a time for eating and drinking, a time for playing and for having fun. And for the Pilgrims, it was a time for sharing and for giving thanks to God.